Good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. This is the meeting of the Mayor and Council on Monday, December 20th. Thank you all for being here this evening. We're going to begin tonight with the Invocation and Pledge, and our pastor who was going to join us got stuck on I-20 and can't be here, so we're going to have Corky Welch lead us in the Invocation and Pledge. Everybody please rise.
Let us pray. Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us here this evening, Lord, the governing body of this great city that we live in. And we just thank you for bringing each of our citizens out. We ask, Lord, that you be with us tonight as the decision makers for the city of Smyrna. Help us to make the best decisions for everybody here, Lord, not just us individually, but just be with us as we make those decisions. Be with each of us as we go home this evening. Keep us safe. Keep us from harm. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
Thank you, Corky. Agenda changes. We do have one tonight. Item, let's see, the item on consent with regard to Aunt Fannie's cabin, we're going to take that off of consent and put it on the formal business agenda. It'll be the last item under formal business after letter H. And I know there are some folks here who'd like to speak on this, and we'll have that discussion amongst council, and I will invite those who are here on that topic to come up and speak at the appropriate time. And when we do that, I just want to come up and you state your name and address for the record, and we'll go from there. Susan Wilkinson is joining us via telephone tonight. She is sick, but wanted to participate. And Susan, I'm getting some feedback on the line from your record. I guess you're watching a recording of, or trying to watch us live, but it's a little bit of a delay. So if you can turn that off and just listen through the phone to what we're doing, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you. That's okay? Thank you. The Mayoral Report, I don't have a whole lot tonight. I do want to recognize that we lost one of our great statesmen. Johnny Isaacson passed away a day or so ago. I had the good fortune of working as a staff member of his. He was my congressman, and got to spend a lot of time with him. I learned a lot of what I know about being a man and being a father and everything else from Johnny Isaacson. They didn't make him a whole lot better. He always went by the motto of you have friends and future friends, and there's always another issue, and I've lived my life by that. And most of the time I ask myself in any situation with hard decision, what would Johnny Isaacson do? And that served me well. So my prayers go out to his family, and I hope he rests easy. With that, we'll go on to land issues, zonings, and annexations. We have two tonight. Item A, 2021-134, zoning request. This is a public hearing. Zoning request Z21-006. Allow rezoning from NS to RDA conditional for the development of 12 single-family homes at a density of 5.9 units per acre, 2.03 acres, land lot 700, Atlanta Road and Campbell Road, Morgan Capital and Development, LLC. Mr. Bennett, the background, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from NS to RDA conditional for 12 single-family detached homes at a density of 5.9 units per acre. The future land use is NAC, and a future land use change to MEDR is required. The Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval by a vote of 6-0 at the November 8th, 2021 meeting, and Community Development recommends approval of this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. This is in Ward 1, Glenn Pickens, and I'm guessing he's going to call up Rusty to give his presentation.
Good evening. This zoning request was, it's been about a year in the making, almost. This request went to P&Z back on November 8th. They made a recommendation for approval by a vote of 6-0. The applicant is looking to rezone the property at the corner of Atlanta Road and Campbell Road. It's just over 2 acres in size. They are proposing to raise the site and then build 12 new single-family residences. The rezoning request is taking this from neighborhood shopping down to residential detached attached conditional. And that'll be 12 homes at a density of 5.9 units per acre. If you all remember when they originally submitted, it was for 23 townhomes. We've worked through the process over the past year and brought this request down to 12 single-family detached homes at this point. The city's future land use has a future land use classification of neighborhood activity center on it. The request is to change that future land use designation and change the intensity down to medium density residential. If you look at the adjoining properties, to the north is public institutional, to the east is low density residential, to the south is neighborhood activity center, and to the west is medium high density residential and medium density residential. So you're pretty much all over the board around this thing. This is the proposed site plan. As you can see, these are the 12 single-family homes. The homes for lots 1 through 6, the fronts will face Campbell Road, and for 7 to 12, those fronts will face the stormwater management area, which will be redesigned to be an amenity feature. With this request, you have a front setback of 20 feet, a side of 5, and a rear 10. And as I explained earlier, the fronts of these lots 1 through 6 will face Campbell Road. It'll have a rear entry garage off a private road. And then 7 through 12 will face the detention area with the rear entry garage off the private road as well. There'll be sidewalks around the development, so you'll be able to be connected to Campbell Road and Atlanta Road, as well as sidewalks through the development to make those connections. This is the new private access road that'll be provided through the development. It's got a minimum width of 24 feet with a 46-foot wide utility right-of-way. This is the location of the stormwater management area. This site abuts a property that's currently under development for a new Methodist church. Their detention pond was sized appropriately to handle the stormwater management for both properties. There is a 50-foot landscape buffer along the property line that adjoins the single-family residential property. And then with this request, the applicant is proposing to enhance this area of the church's property to make it an amenity feature. And then there will be an additional sidewalk connection. With this request, they're requesting a few variances. The first is to reduce the front setback from 25 feet to 20, reduce the rear setback from 30 to 10, and allow an increase in impervious surface area from 45% to 58%, and then reduce the minimum lot size from 7,200 square feet to 3,100 square feet, and reduce the minimum lot width from 50 feet down to 35. Based on this plan, staff supports those requests. These are the proposed home elevations. It's a 2-story product. It's got a mixture of materials between brick, shake, and board and batten. This subject property, it's currently a wooded lot today. And then some pictures of the adjacent properties. Community Development is recommending approval of the rezoning from neighborhood shopping to residential attached for the 12 single-family homes at a density of 5.9 units per acre. With this approval, we're recommending some standard conditions. The first deals with the composition of the homes. The second requires the implementation of a protective covenants on the property. The third ensures a minimum open space requirement. The fourth is the required detention pond and that be screened. The fifth is a requirement for underground utilities. Six requires the developer be responsible for traffic improvements deemed necessary by the city engineer. 7 is a requirement for brick pavers or stamped concrete at the entrance to the subdivision. 8 requires the development of any streets to meet city standards. 9 prohibits the burying of debris on property. And 10 requires a developer to meet the city's current tree ordinance. 11 requires all plans to be stamped by the landscape architect, and 12 requires all common areas to be sodded and landscaped. Then we added some special conditions. 13 is the setbacks that we listed earlier. 14 holds the minimum floor area for the homes at 1,800 square feet. 15 establishes the minimum lot size at 3,150. And 16 increases the impervious surface coverage area to 58%. 17 holds the minimum lot width 35 feet. And 18 establishes the minimum width for the private drive at 24 feet, back of curb to back of curb. 19 requires a right-of-way dedication along Campbell Road to get the sidewalk completely within the public right-of-way. 20 requires that the front elevations for lot 1 through 6 be Campbell Road, and 7 through 12 be the detention, and at the rear elevations facing the private street. 21 requires a 2-car garage. 22 prohibits privacy fencing, and then decorative fencing up to a minimum height of 4 feet in the front yard. 23, the front entrance shall not be gated. And 24 requires a 10-foot landscape strip along Atlanta Road. And then 25 is maintaining the 50-foot landscape buffer. Thank you. And 26, the developer shall be responsible for all the sidewalks in the property. Oh man, I'm running out of juice here. 28 is the sidewalk and landscaping. 29 is installation of the private roads is to be maintained by the HOA. And 30 is the requirement for the shared parking, the shared sidewalks and road connections through the church property. And 31 is requiring appropriate turning radiuses for all the delivery trucks and public safety vehicles. 32, 33, and 34 all deal with the development of the site and maintaining the requirements from Public Works and from Fire Marshal's office. And finally, 35 and 36 bind the development to the site plan and building elevation submitted. And that's all I got for you.
Any questions of Rusty?
Rusty, just one quick question. Under the current zoning of neighborhood shopping, what are some things that can be allowed for that section, for that area?
Daycares, small retail centers, stuff like that. Okay. Retail that's oriented towards the surrounding neighborhood.
Any other questions?
If I could, just give Rusty a second here. Compliments to Councilmember Pickens, really, for working with with the neighborhood and developer to come up with a plan that I think is much more suitable for the area, considering the single-family neighborhoods right behind it. So I know, Glenn, you worked hard with that, and it was a long haul. Appreciate the flexibility of the applicant too to work with the city on this. And then also the compliment to the neighbors, right, because they were engaged with the process and gave you some good direct feedback that you took, and I think the resulting design is much better than the initial. So a couple things to point out for me really is the entrances into the neighborhood, right? Working with the church to have access off Atlanta Road is really huge, and then the better controlled access right across Campbell Road across from Campbell Middle School. And I think the applicant's going to do some work there to help improve that pedestrian safety right there at Campbell and the new street. So all those features really make for a better development and project. So.
Any other questions for Rusty, or can we let him sit down and recover? All right. I'd like to invite the applicant up.
How do I get it to the site plan? Which one of these?
It's on there.
Oh, it is. Okay, great. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Kevin Moore here on behalf of the applicant, Morgan Capital and Development, in this rezoning application. I appreciated Rusty's fine job in introducing it and presenting kind of some of the details and overview of it. I want to take you through some of the history, kind of fill in some of those gaps for you, and hopefully present to you what we believe is an excellent rezoning application and proposed development here at the intersection of Campbell and Atlanta Road. And, if we could go ahead and get back the site. There we go. Thank you. Whomever I'm speaking to that did that, so thank you. Okay, thank you for putting that back up. Again, we have the site plan oriented for those looking at your screen, Atlanta Road on the kind of the left-hand bottom part of the screen, and Campbell Road. This is directly across the intersection from the middle school there at this location. It's just over 2 acres. A little bit about the history, and Rusty was correct. It was almost a year ago. This was first filed as a rezoning application for 23 townhomes. We began working and meeting with, I had meetings with some neighbors and had meetings with city staff, and a lot of coordination, again, that was handled through Councilmember Pickens in coordinating dialogue and conversations. You would think, why does it take a year for a 2-acre parcel? Seems like a long time. But I think both the applicant, Mr. Morgan, George Morgan of Morgan Capital and Development, I think city staff and the council members that were involved as far as coordinating that dialogue realized it's a highly visible piece of property. And as a result, it needs to look right. It needs to fit in. It needs to be appropriate. And that's what we think we've achieved here. Overall, in reducing it basically in half to 12 single-family detached homes instead of 23 townhomes. Was a major plan change as we move through this process. I think one of the other major plan changes or elements that we brought. Some of you may remember when the church was approved for the adjacent property. It's on just over 5 acres. It showed the connectivity with the 2 access roads, and then the rear road going to Campbell Road. But there was an idea that was born of why not coordinate that between the church and its development, which is ongoing right now, and the building of that pretty church, and our proposed development. The landscape stormwater management pond became actually a focal point of that, and that's how do we make this look as if the 2 pieces are not simply independent developments on this total of 7 acres, but how do we make it look where they look like there was actual planning that went into how this would ultimately be developed. So give credit to the applicant. What we came up with was taking what was always intended and had been planned and designed and engineered and in fact constructed as a shared detention facility, but turn what's often referred to as a wet hole in the ground and turn it into a focal point of an amenity for both the future residents, hopefully, as well as the church. This landscape stormwater detention area will instead be a walking trail and amenity. It will be fully landscaped. That's being done by the applicant. And then you have a future HOA to maintain that as well, but also used by the church and its members in the future as a peaceful place for them to go from time to time, and as well as it just pulls the 2 projects together and provides some continuity through landscaping and through those shared features.
In addition, at the corner, you'll note we have a small park, fireplace, arbor type of community gathering area for these residents. They'll be there as a focal point, again, at the intersection itself to bring some life to that intersection and really a presentation. And that's part of what this project is also trying to do is bring a feel, a look to the intersection itself. That's why we have proposed doing the rear-loaded homes so they face outward to Campbell Road, and you don't have rears hanging out over Atlanta Road or Campbell Road. Have an interior street for the rear loading, and what that presents then is a complete picture, we believe, of this proposal. From a zoning and land use standpoint, I think Rusty did a great job. You have a little bit of everything. You have higher density, you have townhomes that are directly across the street on Atlanta Road, but you also have single-family detached that's directly across the street. And you have Argyle Estates, which is just to the northeast and adjoins this property that is single-family traditional neighborhood development that's been there. You have the church, you have the school, you have other commercial uses that are right here at this intersection. And so it really brought a mixed bag. This property is zoned neighborhood shopping, has been that way forever. Neighborhood shopping does allow smaller retail uses, allows daycares, but it also allows for drive-through restaurants. One of our big things that we were discussing with the neighbors, which is always a traffic concern here with the school traffic in the mornings and the afternoons and what happens at this signalized intersection, making sure that whatever use goes in here doesn't make that traffic situation, the ability to circulate, move in and out, and move through here any worse. Also, traffic safety, pedestrian safety, because it is a school. The type of use that goes in here is very important. 12 single-family detached homes, we think, accomplishes that from a traffic impact standpoint. It's extremely minimal, especially compared to the commercial uses for which it's already zoned today and could be used without having to come before this council for drive-through restaurants and the like, which would have, we believe, far more potential adverse impact on traffic, pedestrian safety, and so forth in and out of this intersection. We have agreed with all of the staff conditions that Rusty reviewed with you. We're in support of those and agreement with those. I do want to point out one aspect to it. At the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, there was a good deal of discussion dealing with that 50-foot buffer that's adjacent to Argyle Estates about whether that should be a berm, whether those trees, there's some good stand of trees and buffer there that's existing, whether that should remain. We'd agreed at the P&Z level that we would not do the berm, or let staff kind of direct that to ensure that there's a good buffer. The idea is to have a great buffer, whether it is a combination of natural, landscaping, or whatnot. But we don't want to mandate the berm necessarily, because to do the berm means all the existing would have to come down. So that was a commitment we made. I just wanted to bring that to the council's attention. And hopefully you'll consider that as part of any motion of approval, that maybe we can let staff direct that, because we've been in touch with the residents. We all have been out there and stood there, and so there's some discussion I think that would be appropriate there at that time that staff can direct. With that, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Also, Mr. George Morgan, principal of the applicant, Morgan Capital and Development, is here, and we respectfully request your approval of this rezoning application. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Moore? I'll say that I represented that ward, Ward 1, when I was a city council member for that ward. And I remember a lot of different proposals for that side, a medical office building, many townhomes at 2x, 3x the density. I want to thank y'all for your work with Councilman Pickens and the public and the neighbors, and taking your time and bringing us something that is a lot more palatable than, I think, a lot of folks would like that to stay a wooded area or be a park, but that's private land at the end of the day, and our job is to make the best use of it for those proposals. So thank you for your work, and there's no questions. This is a public hearing. I'd invite anybody who wishes to speak for or against this item to come up and be sworn in now by our city attorney.
I do.
If you'll
Hi.
state your name and
My
address
name
for
is
the record.
Matt Tinknell, and if we could put the site plan back up, I don't know who's controlling that. So my house, I own 2 lots to the right side of the screen. There's 2 lots that abut technically the church's property, but I have full visibility of what this development will be. And so I would like to say a few things. Thank you for everyone who's involved. Glenn, I know you worked so hard on this. And I appreciate everyone's effort. I think the residential is definitely way better of a use than some of the things we considered, for instance, the medical office building. So thanks for your diligence and patience there. I do think that 12 units, the density is a little bit too high. I'd rather see 8 units. I think 12 feels a little bit too high. I know there's a precedent set down the street in Atlanta Road and so forth, but the actual adjacent property, the precedent set is low density residential. You know, my house, I have 2 lots, and I almost have a ½ acre based on 1 residential unit. So anyway, I would propose for a lower density than 12. But my main concern is there's a total of 7½ acres between this parcel and the church. And out of the whole acreage, it was a complete clear cut other than a strip of trees right there along Atlanta Road. So there's 1 strip of trees, of beautiful mature trees that I wish we could keep. And they have been kept as of yet. And because of this development, that access road that goes on to the west side, well, the left part of the property, that access road, my understanding is going to cut out those trees. And I understand there's a cross-access easement and there's connectivity and so forth. I get all that. I would propose finding a way to make that access drive positioned where it doesn't have to knock out the trees. I think it's a shame that a 7½ acre site that was fully wooded would be completely clear-cutted, and the only remaining trees would now be clear-cutted because of this development. I'm not against the residential development. I think that's a good use. I wish the density was lower. I wish we could find a way to position that access road better to go around the trees, or I don't know what the answer is, but I think 7½ acres, I think we can find a way. Where you stand on my deck, I can see all the way to Atlanta Road. The only thing blocking complete visibility from the trucks that drive down Atlanta Road are those trees. And if those trees are removed, then there's nothing. I understand there's a landscape plan, there's trees that'll be planted. I doubt those trees will be much bigger than me when initially planted, so it'll take a long time for them to mature. And I'm very thankful to the city. There's all these talks about a berm and additional landscape plantings in the back, and I appreciate all of that. But even considering that, I still think the existing trees that front Atlanta Road should be retained. That's all to say. Thank you, everyone. Sure.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this item? All right, we'll close the public. Oh, coming up. Scott, if you'll swear him in, please.
Sir.
Okay, if you'll state your name and address for the record.
My name is Mark Smith. I live on 2800 Spring Creek Place. Every time we put a new development in someplace, they put in townhouses across the street, they put in a Winn-Dixie shopping center, and every time something like that happens, it takes a nice big parking lot, lots of parking spaces, lots of roof, but it doesn't leave much land left to absorb the moisture. The moisture runs off, the rain runs off, and floods the creek. There's a lot of people that live alongside that creek. I happen to be one of them. And when the creek floods, we have I think we have a 100-year floodplain. Well, we've had the 100-year floodplain flood 5 times in the last 2 years. So we're putting a lot of stress on the creek, but we don't do any maintenance on the creek. We don't widen the creek, we don't deepen the creek, primarily because it's on private property. But we still have to be responsible for the maintenance there. I'm probably one of the lowest people on the creek side, and I'm the first one to get flooded. Not a good position to be in. I've installed pumps so that my crawl space can stay somewhat dry, but has anybody done the statistics on how much water is going to be displaced? I know we have a pond, but that water soaks into the land, and the land soaks into the creek. So when it rains, the creeks flood. and people who live on the creek, they have flood damage to their homes. And the city has an easement, the state has an easement, the county has an easement. We're losing our land just so we can sell another building permit. I'd like to see somebody develop that area. I think that's a great idea. I think putting nice townhomes in the area is a great idea. But we have to have a plan to handle the water. It might only be 5 times in the next 2 years on a 100-year floodplain. There's also the 500-year floodplain, which I hope to be gone by then. But have we done any water studies on drainage? And I'd like to see that done, not just for my sake, but for everybody who lived alongside the creek. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Rusty, do you want to speak to the stormwater issue and what we're doing not only for this project but also citywide?
Yes. This site was unique in that the stormwater management is on the adjoining property, and it was required to manage the stormwater for the entire site. When we go through these rezonings, we require a 10% reduction from pre-development. So we'll do at permitting, we'll do a full hydrology analysis of the site upstream and downstream. And the engineers will come together and make a decision what are the appropriate BMPs for the site to ensure that we're not adversely affecting adjoining property owners from this. Most of this water on this site runs from the church side towards the detention facility, and then everything from the townhomes runs towards the detention facility. Obviously, with this development, in the roadways and all that, you'll collect that water that sheet flows onto the roadways, and then it'll take it to the detention facility. We actually met with a resident this morning who had similar concerns because he abuts the property, one of the single-family neighbors that abuts to the east, and showed him those plans and how all that works and how we evaluate that stuff. I'll be happy to give him my contact information. We'll set up a consultation with him, and we can show him the plans and talk about how we view this stuff.
Is that suitable to you to meet with our staff and have some of your questions answered and maybe?
Answering my questions would be great.
Great.
But seeing action taken, because that water is going to end up in my backyard. Okay, that's great, but it's still going to end up, and we've still done nothing about correcting the creek and don't manage the water once it hits the ground. Definitely uphill. So it'd be great to have my questions answered, but sometimes it's nice to have action taken.
Rusty, can you set that meeting up?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to speak for or against this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I will turn it over to Mr. Pickens.
Thanks, Mayor. Actually, I have one question for Mr. Moore. If you, as part of your plan, are you going to also clear out the overgrowth and brush in the right-of-way between at the intersection right there?
Because there is a lot of overgrown brush at the intersection of Campbell and Atlantic, and we would love to be able to do that.
Okay.
It's city property because it's city right-of-way, so that needs to be coordinated through staff or through the city procedures for doing that. But if you'll let us, we'd love to.
Yeah, so you'll agree to an added stipulation on this?
Yes, happy to.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then if I could, just one question for Mr. Moore. Could you just describe, if you happen to know, what pedestrian safety devices will be installed outside the neighborhood right at the crosswalk for Campbell Middle School?
What's been suggested to us is for sure we're going to have a crosswalk on our side, and then work with staff to coordinate what some pedestrian safety there. Whether it's oftentimes it's just making sure you have appropriate signage, lights, and so forth. Flashing lights and those types of things, and signage and crosswalks, and making people aware of it, and a designated place for people to cross. as opposed to free flow, and that's when you have problems.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Mr. Pickens?
Thank you.
As I think Rusty said earlier, this is taking about a year to get where we are now, and this is probably the sixth or seventh site plan that we've worked through, and significantly better than what they started out as 23 townhomes, and I think it's a much better fit for the community than having a strip center right there. So based on discussion tonight and the added stipulation of clearing out that corner, I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Pickens. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gould. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson on the line, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Wilkinson votes in the affirmative. And that's approved 7-0. Thank you so much. Item B, 2021-616, public hearing, kick off the 5-year update of the City of Smyrna 2040 Comprehensive Plan, Community Development Department. Mr. Bennett, the background, please.
Yes, sir. The City of Smyrna City Council is required to hold an initial public hearing regarding the start of the city's 5-year comprehensive plan update. This is in order to brief the community on the process to be used to develop the plan and opportunities for public participation in plan development, and to obtain input on the proposed planning process. The Department of Community Affairs, also known as DCA, requires an update to the city's comprehensive plan every 5 years. The current comprehensive plan was adopted in 2017. Therefore, an update is required to be submitted to DCA by October 31st, 2022. The 5-year update requires the city to update the following key elements of the 2017 comprehensive plan: the needs and opportunities, vision and goals, transportation, economic development, land use, broadband services, which is a new requirement, and a community work program. Community development will coordinate with the stakeholder committee and the Atlanta Regional Commission over the next year to update the comprehensive plan. Additionally, there will be other opportunities for the public at large to provide input into the update in order to ensure that the plan reflects the full range of community needs and values. The comprehensive plan for Smyrna, Georgia is mandated by the Georgia Planning Act 634, Georgia Law 1989, page 1317 through 1391. Also, this act requires that each jurisdiction in the state prepare and implement a comprehensive plan, which is reviewed by the Regional Development Center. Staff recommends Mayor and Council hold a public hearing per Section 1504 of the Smyrna Code to announce the process for the comprehensive plan as required by the Rules of Georgia Department of Community Affairs, Chapter 110-12-1, Municipal Standards and Procedures for Local Comprehensive Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Rusty, is there anything to add to that background?
No, Mr. Bennett did a great job of summarizing it. We'll kick off here with the steering committee and figuring out who's going to be sitting on that committee. And then we'll hold that initial meeting, and then we should move forward with the public input with open houses, online surveys. We'll probably attend the Jonquil Festival to solicit some perspective on projects and stuff like that. We should have the first draft that should be ready to send to ARC and DCA towards the end of August. And then once we get the comments back from them, we would submit it back to them, address those comments and submit it back to them in October. And that will make sure we maintain our qualified local community designation so we can maintain our options for grant funding.
Any questions, Rusty, or any discussion? All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Oh, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak for or against this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Pickens.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll make a motion to approve 4B 2021-616.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Lindley. All those in favor, please vote. And I should note that Dr. Wheaton is away on travel this evening. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yay.
Okay. Ms. Wilkinson votes yes, and it's approved 6-0. Thank you. We'll move on to privilege licenses. We don't have any. Item 6 is formal business. 6A 2021-609, approval of the appointment of Ward 2 resident Jonathan Howard to the Planning and Zoning Board. This is a 2-year term that will expire December 31st, 2023. Mr. Wagner.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think Jonathan will be a great asset to the Planning and Zoning Board. He lives off of Spring, and I think he's going to do Ward 2 proud. And with that, I will make a motion to approve item 6A as previously read.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Pickens. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Wilkinson votes yea, and that's approved 6-0. Thank you. Item B, 2021-605, approval to amend the budget for items not included in the fiscal year 2022 budget adoption for a total amount of $246,500. Mr. Bennett, the background, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During fiscal year 2022, several expenditures have occurred that were not included in the adopted budget. Some of these items include merit raises and police raises have been discussed with council at previous meetings for approval. Some have not. For financial reporting purposes, we need to amend the budget to cover these expenditures. We'll be using a combination of excess revenues over budgeted amounts and general fund reserves, which is the fund balance for this purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Any discussion or questions among council? Mr. Lindley, will you handle this item, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion do pass as read and presented.
I got a second by Mr. Welch. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes.
Okay. And that's approved 6-0. Item C, 2021-613, approval of amendment number 5 to the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG subrecipient agreement, number CD20, C20SA-A, and CD20-C20SA-F to extend the termination date for the agreement to June 30th, 2022, and authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documents. Mr. Bennett, any background, please?
Yes, sir. Over the past several years, CDBG funds invested in the city have paid for numerous public improvements, and the city of Smyrna continues being a subrecipient of the Cobb County Community Development Block Grant Program. Effective January 1st, 2022, the subrecipient agreement is amended to reflect the changes as noted. All other language, requirements, and provisions of the original subrecipient agreement shall remain unchanged and in full force. The termination date for the agreement as amended shall be extended to June 30th, 2022. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Pickens, will you handle this item tonight?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve 6C 2021-613.
Have a motion seconded by Mr. Wagner. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes.
And this is approved 6-0. Thank you. Item D, 2021-614, approval of contract with DHS, for low-income household water assistance program to accept assistance payments from DHS on behalf of Smyrna utility customers with outstanding balances and authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documents. Mr. Bennett, the background, please.
Yes, sir. LIHWAP, which stands for Low Income Household Water Assistance Program, is a federal program that helps low-income households pay for drinking water and wastewater for their homes. This program will help our residents pay their home water bill if the water bill is in their name or if they can verify that they are experiencing a water burden. The Consolidated Appropriations Act 2021, which is Public Law Number 116-260, which was signed on December 27th, 2020, included $638 million in funding with instructions for the administration for children and families within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to carry out grants to states, territories, and tribes to assist low-income households with water and wastewater bills. Additionally, on March 11th, 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which is Public Law 117-2, appropriated an additional $500 million to the new LIHWAP effort. LIHWAP will open on November 1st, 2021 in Georgia and will prioritize households that have an arrearage or past due water bill through the remainder of the year. On January 3rd, 2022, the program will begin serving households that contain seniors 60 years of age and older, and households that contain children 5 years of age and younger. All of the households will be eligible to receive LIHWAP assistance beginning February 1st, 2022. Water suppliers have to complete an agreement with DHS to be able to receive payments on behalf of our customers. Staff recommends approval of contract with DHS for LIHWAP to accept assistance payments from DHS on behalf of Smyrna utility customers with outstanding balances and authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documents.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett, for that thorough explanation of what I think is, if we vote on this, we're able to receive federal funds to help those citizens in need.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, all right. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Make a motion to read 6D 2021-614 as previously read.
Okay, have a motion to approve, seconded by Mr. Wagner. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes. 6D, yes.
And that's approved 6-0. Item E, 2021-619, approval of the agreement with Environmental Difference Staffing, 2470 Windy Hill Road Southeast, Suite 442, Marietta, Georgia 30067, for temporary supplemental personnel for Public Works to assist in maintaining service levels for sanitation, water, streets, etc., as needed in the department, and authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documents. Mr. Bennett, the background, please.
Yes, sir. As a result of the pandemic, employment staffing, especially in Public Works, has decreased significantly, leaving services such as residential sanitation, streets, and water to not only advertise for employment opportunities, but to look at alternate ways to staff these departments in order to maintain levels of service for the city residents. A recent incentive program has increased applications. However, the city will still need temporary staffing to maintain the required number of personnel to complete the needed task in Public Works. Public Works and Purchasing staff recommend approval of this agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Any questions or discussion? If not, I'll turn it over to Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve item 6E, 2021-619 as previously read.
We have a motion seconded by Mr. Pickens. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes, for 6E.
And that's approved 6-0. Item F, 2021-620, authorization to award car wash services to Caliber Car Wash for fleet membership, unlimited washes per month for $15 and one-time wash for $10, and Take 5 Car Wash for one-time washes as requested, and authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documentation. This is just I'll take the background on this one. This is just giving us a better deal on our fleet car washes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lindley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion do pass as previously presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Pickens. All those in favor, please vote. Mr. Bennett, I was afraid you'd give an extensive background on that issue that we didn't need. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes, 6F.
Okay. And that's approved 6-0. Item G, 2021-617, approval of the contract to continue commercial sanitation service with Waste Management to include Waste Management taking over the billing and customer service and providing the city with a franchise fee. Mr. Bennett, the background.
Yes, sir. The city of Smyrna began contracted services with Advanced Disposal in March of 2010. The initial contract included 2 5-year service periods and then optional renewals annually. We renewed the contract last year after the merger of Advanced Disposal and Waste Management for an additional year. The current contract terminates on February 28th, 2022. The city requested proposals for residential and commercial solid waste and recycling services and received 4 proposals. We discarded the proposals for the residential and carried through with the proposals for commercial, which were evaluated by staff. The scores of those that sent proposals, Waste Management would score to 93.67, Waste Pro at 83.05, and BFI Republic 74.72. Service providers were asked to submit a fee proposal to provide billing to all customers and offer a franchise fee. The charts were compared and pricing for the top two providers and differences in franchise fees. Based on proposed new cost, current billing, and revenues and franchise fee, staff recommends award of this service to our incumbent service provider, Waste Management.
Any discussion amongst council? Any questions?
I have a question, Derek. I don't know.
I can put the microphone to it.
Okay. So is this also going to include the condominiums and like apartment complexes as commercial?
Yes, ma'am. We continue to service the either the waste receptacles or the compactors in these locations.
You able to hear that, Ms. Wilkinson?
No.
The answer was yes.
Oh, it includes the condominiums in town.
It does include them, yes.
And that customer service level for those residents that live in townhomes or condos, yeah. That's my concern.
That's right. They are included in this.
Okay.
Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lindley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A motion do pass as presented.
Have a motion seconded by Mr. Welch. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson?
Day. 6G.
She voted no. And that's approved 5-1 with Ms. Wilkinson voting in the negative. Item H, ordinance 2021-23, approval for the amendment of the Code of Ordinances as it relates to membership of the Parks and Recreation Commission members and to authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documents. Mr. Bennett, the background, please.
Yes, sir. The Parks and Recreation Commission shall consist of 8 members who shall serve without compensation, and each of whom shall be a resident of the city. Each council member shall appoint 1 commission member. The 8th member, the mayor's appointee, shall be a resident of the city to serve at large. The initial term of office shall begin on the first Monday of each year after a general municipal election and shall be for 2 years. The subsequent term during a term of mayor and council shall begin the first meeting of mayor and council in the 3rd year of the term of that mayor and council and end at the end of the term of that mayor and council. In the event of a vacancy, any appointment by the governing body shall be for the unexpired portion of such term. Additionally, the mayor and members of the Parks and Recreation Committee shall be ex officio members.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Any discussion? All right, we'll turn this over to Mr. Lindley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Motion do pass as presented.
Have a motion seconded by Mr. Gould. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes.
She votes in the affirmative on item H, and that's approved 6-0. Now this is our item that we moved over from consent. It's actually item K here, item 2021-622, authorization to begin the process to solicit proposals for the sale and removal of Aunt Fannie's Cabin Building, 2875 Atlanta Road, Smyrna, Georgia 30080, with the stipulation that if no acceptable proposals are received, the building will be demolished. Mr. Bennett, the background, please.
Yes, so the Future of Aunt Fannie's Cabin Task Force recommends the authorization to begin the process to solicit proposals for the sale and removal of Aunt Fannie's Cabin Building, 2875 Atlanta Road, Smyrna, Georgia 30080, with the stipulation that if no acceptable proposals are received, the building will be demolished.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I'm going to turn it over to our one of the co-chairs of the task force, Mr. Lindley, to present.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table this item until January 18th.
Okay. We have a motion to table this item until January 18th. Do I have a second? Ms. Wilkinson has seconded. We'll have the vote now. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson, who seconded? Okay. Votes in favor of the motion to put table. Okay, that motion is defeated 4-2. Okay, I will turn it over now to Mr. Lindley to present the task force recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first want to sort of set the stage for the room. I know there has been a lot of information posted this weekend. There was a lot of press over the last week and a half. So I think a little bit of context. In the spring of earlier this year, I guess, we had a hearing with the Committee of the Whole. Our city officials, including the building inspector, presented to the council as a whole the sort of state of repair. The lot of documents out there that were given to us that I presume are on the city website, but it paints sort of a vivid picture. This summer, the mayor formed a task force, and my co-chair, Dr. Wheaton, is away. We talked about him being away and whether he wanted to wait on that, and he was fine with us to carry on. Felt it was important, as I do, that we wrap up this matter this year, considering that the task force concluded its work. I want to start by saying, because again, and this is largely in response to a lot of the chatter and commentary over the weekend, this is not something that we went looking for. I am the Smyrna native on this council. I know all about Aunt Fannie's cabin. I know, and I suspect, with the exception of Mr. Welch, I'm probably one of the few that ever visited it. So I can speak with some authority on it. But I want to make clear, this is not something that retargeted and decided that we were going to go champion this cause, as some have alleged in commentary over the weekend. It was a matter of public safety. We have a city building, city facility that by our own building inspector was deemed dangerous, a menace to the public. So that's how we're here. And I take the charge very seriously, that as did Dr. Wheaton, and I believe the 6 people that comprised the task force, to look at it, weigh our options, and come back with a recommendation. I think it is critically important to start with the next fact, which is that no maintenance, absolutely zero maintenance, has been perpetrated, completed, executed, done, whatever you want to call it, in 24 years. When the building was moved in 1997, the city did what it did, created a welcome center and an event venue, and rented it, we're told, sporadically throughout the years. But no maintenance was ever done on the building. Again, that's why we're here. This is not about revisionist history or any of the other stuff that has been talked about over the last couple of days, largely in social media. The makeup of the committee was myself, Dr. Wheaton, and my colleague to my right, Mr. Welch. It included 3 citizen members, Larry Banks, LaTarsha Pearson, and Mike Terry, a noted Smyrna historian. We met 3 times, roughly over 6 hours, had an extensive sort of expose download. I called it an A&E special on Aunt Fannie's cabin and Fannie Williams. We had folks from the Smyrna Historical Society visit with us, as well as the Cobb Landmark group. Lots of questions for them. We certainly fielded lots of information on the origins of the restaurant, a lot of information about the restaurant, and how it came to rest in 1997 from its original location on Campbell Road to the heart of our downtown in 1997. The initial questions that we posed as a committee and as a task force as we looked at it was item number 1, which was to renovate it. The estimates to renovate it were $500,000 and a little up from that, we suppose. Again, I want to remind the room, no maintenance had been done since 1997. There's no foundation. There are extensive water issues. Every time it rains, there's water moving under the building. And at our council briefing at the Committee of the Whole this spring, we had and took action as a council because the rear of the building was caving in. There was extensive water pooling on the roof, and throughout the building you can see black mold. The task force received and reviewed 2 proposals that the Community Development Office gathered this year. One of them was with us at our final meeting to sort of go through the process of how they came up with an estimate. I recognize a lot of intrigue about how such a small facility could cost $500,000, but I would remind everybody this is a building that was moved once, hadn't been touched since 1997, and has to now be brought up to government public building standards. It is not handicap accessible today, so the list and expenses grow quite rapidly when you consider all of that. Option 2 was to rebuild it, take it down to the ground, save the fireplaces, and rebuild it. Their estimate was around $400,000. I would note at the third meeting, a third party was brought in at the request of Mr. Mike Terry, who vouched largely that the numbers in the renovation cost as well as the rebuild cost seemed about accurate. And after extensive discussion with our committee and task force, no one really challenged those numbers. Option 3 was to demolish the facility, which I think would be minimal cost and is simply probably something our public works folks could handle. There would need to be a lead and asbestos abatement done. Option 4, which we brought to discussion sort of late, but it was heavily discussed at the third meeting, was allow it to be moved. After conferring with city council, or rather the city attorney, he felt that proper safeguards could be put in place to allow private group or citizen to move it elsewhere to their own property. We did entertain as a group certain entities that are out there that have done this, but no interest was shown. As an example, the Atlanta History Center, which has relocated several buildings to their campus. One very important piece is that there was universal agreement that a proper memorial, be instituted for Miss Fannie Williams and her contributions to the community, not only Smyrna, but the county and indeed the region. I have to say, for my part, that is probably the most important takeaway. And regardless of what happens to the cabin, we've got to get that right. I think a disservice was committed with her years ago and seems to have been perpetuated over time, unfortunately. So the findings. We met finally on Monday, December 13th. All 5 members were present. 1 was absent, but following the meeting was in full agreement with our findings. The discussion was that either to demolish with the allowance to give it away or move it with a process open through February 1st, whereas the city attorney would draft an RFP for any willing applicant to move it at their expense to another site. This, again, all 5 members were present. The tenor and tone was agreement that we follow this path. A number of folks citing that we didn't need the facility. We already have historic structures in the Reed House, Bronner Hall, Taylor Bronner. I would say the city has demonstrated a willingness to preserve historic buildings, certainly. We have never, up till Aunt Fanny's cabin, preserved a restaurant. Mr. Mayor, there is a summation, and I would ask that the city clerk ready that for public disposal for anyone that is interested. There's about a 50-minute audio of the final task force meeting. if there's interest, we can play the summation part of that if we need to. But I think I believe it definitely clears up some of the misinformation that we heard over the weekend. And with that, I will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Lindley. Mr. Welch has requested to speak. Oh, that was from previous. I'm going to speak after the motion. After the motion, okay. I'll open it up to council now to speak for discussion.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Lindley, for your diligent work, and co-chair Dr. Wheaton, who's not here with us today, and then of course the community members, Mike Terry and the other folks, and of course Councilmember Welch. It's a difficult topic for us, right? It's got a lot of folks in the community feel strongly about the cabin, have some really fond memories, and I think I appreciate that, and I think everybody up here appreciates what the restaurant has meant for the city of Smyrna. But also, obviously, not everybody sees it in the same way, right? Not everybody sees that same history as in the same positive light. As Councilmember Lindley mentioned, our community clearly values saving our history. As we mentioned, the Reed House, Taylor Bronner House, the Taylor Bronner Hall, the substantial investment we made into the Smyrna History Museum recent years, and we staffed that full time. So we want to tell the story, we want to maintain the story of Smyrna and be able to tell that in years to come. I wholeheartedly believe in the cost estimates that presented to the committee. If anybody has doubt, I'm sure the documents are public and can be read. Folks who do renovation of these type of structures looked at this facility and came back with reasonable estimates given the condition of the building. So the $500,000 number, even though it sounds crazy to some of us, because how we would do it on our own if it was a private building, does not apply to a public building, and these are real costs. So we're left with the decision to spend substantial public funds to rehabilitate a building, again in the range of $500,000, or potentially memorialize Fannie Williams and the positive memories that many of our residents have in a more creative way, while balancing out that the restaurant's marketing strategies over the years represents a very, very painful past for a substantial part of our community. That's a very difficult thing for us to wrestle with. So it's my personal opinion, it's not a worthy investment for the city, particularly since we have the Smyrna History Museum 10 feet away from that structure, which was built for this exact purpose, was to, again, tell the story of Smyrna. So that's how I look at it. It's a fairly matter-of-fact financial decision of where we should spend our public funds. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. Anybody else would like to speak? Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, I want to thank the comments that came before. I think, we've heard it suggested recently and throughout this process that demolishing this or letting it leave the city's property would be that we're trying to erase our history and erase the history of Fannie Williams. I think that couldn't be further from the truth from what we've suggested, what we've talked about, what we want to do to be able to honor her. When this came up in the original task force meeting, I think we all expressed that in some way, that no matter what came out from this, we wanted to ensure that we do what we could to tell the true story of Fannie Williams, not the story that's being told by this building. And I think this building and this restaurant used what's essentially a caricature of Fannie Williams for marketing for their restaurant, to try to get people to come and tell their version of this story that we all know now isn't true. Fannie Williams, from what we've learned through this process, was an incredible woman and did a lot of great things for the community, for the city, for the area, and we should honor that. And I think that's what we all want to do. We're talking about this this building and spending this amount of money on this building that really represents some of the worst things when it comes to race, some of the worst tactics and things that are used to talk about race. I think if we're going to spend the money, we want to talk about that, and we want to talk about raising funds for something. We should be talking about raising funds to tell her true story, not with this building. We don't need to do that with this building. We can do it in so many other ways to tell the true history of her, to tell the history of Smyrna, especially as it relates to race and the issues that we've had with that in the past, and to probably too close recent, the recent past as well. We can spend that money. We should tell that story. As has been noted, we have a history museum right next door. And if this space comes available, we can expand to this area too, maybe, and do something there. That's what I'd rather spend money on than saving a restaurant that used Fannie Williams for this purpose without telling her story at all. So my opinion on this is we need to honor her. We need to honor, the true story there and deal and kind of reckon with Smyrna's history on race. We don't need the building that represents some of the worst of that to do that.
Mr. Welch?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Travis pointed out that there hadn't been any maintenance on this facility in 24 years. I know in the last 5 years we've performed maintenance on it. I believe we built the front porch twice in the last few years. And at that point, that's when we should have done something with it, I'll have to admit. But it wasn't brought up to me that there was any significant problems inside. I've been in the building every year up until 2020 at Christmas, because that's where we had Santa House, and I've been there for 2 or 3 nights each year. My opinion is it's not much worse now than, if it is any worse than it was 3 years ago. But I sat on this committee, and I really believe that it was a doomed committee before we went there. I think the decisions were made by Mr. Wheaton and Mr. Lindley both that they wanted to tear the building down. And I don't necessarily agree that the building is in good shape, because it is not. It is in horrible condition. I don't disagree with the cost estimate that's on the facility. But I do believe that it's worth saving for the city to have that historic site in there. I believe the African American community, there are many out there that believe that it should be saved. Somebody pointed out to me today that I agreed to spend in excess of $2 million to buy the Reed House and save it, and I did. And it kind of came to me that, well, why am I not supporting this? So, with that, I want to be able to save the building. In all honesty, I would hope that over the next few weeks that we have someone or some group that comes forth and agrees to take it as some kind of a project that they can come in and raise funds for, and I think the city should help with that. I can't spend $600,000 to just repair it. Just right now, anyway. I may change my mind about that, but it's a lot of money to repair a small building, and but I believe that if someone came forth and said we'll go through a fundraiser and do something to repair that building, I would support leaving it exactly where it is and making the repairs so that it'll be there for generations to come, because I think there are lessons to be learned there. Most of the people on this council are too young to remember much about discrimination. You're from Smyrna, Georgia, and I grew up in the early '60s, and discrimination was very prevalent. It was wrong, and it was something that we don't want to see again. I don't think the African American community wants to see it again. I think this building certainly is a symbol of what was there and what we don't want to happen again. And I think we all ought to voice our opinions on that, and that's why we're here tonight. So with that, we'll move forward with it, but y'all know my opinion on it at this point.
Mr. Lindley. Yes, ma'am. Miss Glenn's going to go, and then I'll open the floor to you, Ms. Wilkinson. Ms. Pickens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. I just want to say that I agree with the committee's decision on removing Aunt Fanny's cabin. As Tim has said earlier, that the city has made significant investment in its history, spending however much money on preserving Taylor Bronner and the Reed House, and is also having the museum right next to Aunt Fanny's. Smyrna should not be in the business of saving old restaurants. I don't believe this is a good move and a good use of tax dollars. This building hasn't been touched or maintained for 25 years, and now it basically needs a complete overhaul. The history of Fannie's Cabin is rooted in racism and exploitation of minorities for financial gain, even Fannie Williams, who never even had financial stake in this restaurant. And she passed away long before most Smyrnans visited it. This council has been clear on our stance towards racism and discrimination, and moving forward, we cannot separate the two from this building from its racist past. Fannie Williams deserves to be celebrated, and we all agree on that tonight, and celebrated for her historic accomplishments in advancing civil rights. And this building does not do that.
Thank you, Mr. Pickens. Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've heard a lot of emphasis from my fellow council members about it being a restaurant. And it was a restaurant, but it was also something else before it was a restaurant. And it was a home of sharecroppers, which I really think it also has an important part of our history. And I also think that the history before it was a restaurant is important. But I think that we have received some amazing emails from citizens of the city that talk about their ideas and ways that the Aunt Fannie's Cabin can be used. And I just feel like it's very important that we listen to some of these ideas and embrace them and be open to the citizens. And they are, and because that is, after all, why we're all serving on this council, is for the citizens. And then I also want to address the amount of money. It is a lot of money, but since I've been on the council for 10 years, I see us spending a lot of money on things that, to me, are probably not even as important as this is to tell our history and to tell about Fannie Williams and her struggles. And I just feel like we need more time and we need to talk about these things. I've seen some comments from people from the African American community that have emphasized that they would like to see us save it and even look into it a little bit more, and they have shared their thoughts and ideas with us. As far as the cost, I know I heard Councilman Welch bring up a couple of things about the funds, but what I recall is we bought the Reed House for $1.8 million, and then we spent $1.9 million renovating it. And I know it's a bigger house, but I think that as far as importance to our community, and from what I'm hearing from other people, it doesn't make this one less important. And I just feel like that there may be some ways or opportunities from the community, and I really feel like we should be being more open to hearing from those community members. So, okay, with that I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson. Any other comments from council members before we open it up for public comment?
I would just note that according to Mr. Bennett, jump in here or correct me if I'm wrong, according to the records that we reviewed, per community development, no substantial maintenance had been completed on the facility since it opened in 1997 as a welcome center and Aunt Fannie's Cabin.
We have no records of any, no, sir, other than I guess Councilman Welch may have some background information, but there are no records to indicate that nothing substantial.
And at present, there are supports holding up the rear of the building, which is actually the newest part, because there was water pooling on the roof. So there, again, we get back to that deemed unsafe by our building inspector. This was not something that a member of council or the mayor or the city administrator took lightly. It was our building inspector that deemed it unsafe for the public. I would note that the makeup, to Ms. Wilkinson's comments, the makeup of the committee comprised 3 African Americans who spoke passionately about memorializing Fannie Williams, but were equally passionate about their disdain for this facility being on city property and in the city arsenal of event venues. So I didn't want to let that get by. And I would note, Mr. Welch, the committee was not doomed from the get-go. I sort of take umbrage with someone questioning my integrity. You heard the same thing I did. I would note, as a matter of integrity, the room agreed on last Monday, a week ago, with next steps. My position has not changed. And again, for the benefit of those listening, there's audio that you can reference everybody's comments and where they stand. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Wilkinson, did you have additional comments?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other?
Oh, you know what? I was going to say that I also recall some time ago, since I've been on the council, that we did some work on the cabin, as Corky stated.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from council? Okay, with that, I know there are folks here to speak on this topic, and I would invite you all up to the microphone. When you come speak, you'll have 3 minutes, and please state your name and your address for the record, please. So I'd invite anybody who wishes to speak on this. Ms. Castleberry?
My name is Lisa Williams Castleberry. I live at 2600 North Road, Smyrna. I've lived in Smyrna all of my life, and I worked at Aunt Fannie's cabin when I was in high school, early 70s. So I know what it represents, and I am in agreement of having it demolished. But please do something for Fannie Williams. I think she deserves to be honored. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Karen Shockley, and I live in West Village, right down the street. Just recently moved here. I lived in Marietta for about 12 years. I don't have any personal experience with it. I just read about this wonderful woman. But what I'm trying to understand is why we can't turn this negative into a positive and support minority businesses by considering putting something there, either moving it, but making this negative into a positive, much like Tyler Perry did. So I'm just trying to understand, first of all, why there wasn't any work done on this facility for 24 years, if that's true. Secondly, I'm trying to understand why, with statues being moved, whatever the racial controversy is, why aren't we making a negative into a positive by supporting minority businesses on these properties, rebuilding them, renovating them? You can keep up one wall and build around it. You can move it. But why aren't you reaching out to the African American community of business owners, as I am, to try to help us to try to figure out how we can make this something that the entire community can appreciate and still honor this wonderful woman?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's Mark Smith, 2800 Spring Creek Place. I think you already got me down. I have to take umbrage with the people who think it's a racist cabin. How many of you have watched the video that's at the cabin? Okay. There's a historic biop on Aunt Fannie and the cabin and the history of the cabin done by Kennesaw State College. They had me do the production of the video. I did the history on it. And matter of fact, I even tried buying the property. But it was some deal that they could get better zoning if they donated the property to the city of Smyrna. Aunt Fannie's cabin has a very strong history for African Americans. It's a woman-owned business, woman-operated business. She ran the whole show, made money for the boss. It's phenomenal. If you get a chance to watch the video, I brought it with me if anybody wants to see it. It was available in the cabin for quite a few years. I used to make educational videos up in the state of Wisconsin in the 70s, came down here and ate at Aunt Fannie's cabin. Had a rosin baked potato there, first time I ever had one of those. It's worth saving, it's worth keeping the memory. If we don't do it on, we can use minority-owned businesses, we can use privately owned businesses. I've done construction in the city of Smyrna We've rebuilt old houses and made them fantastic. Take a $20,000 house and turn it into a $180,000 house. This helps Smyrna. It helps our tax base. We've got to do the same thing. The fact that the building was donated and no maintenance was done, shame on Smyrna. The fact that it wasn't maintained, shame on Smyrna. The fact that a sinkhole appeared in the parking lot and it wasn't fixed, shame on Smyrna. Let's fix that. Let's forget the shame. Let's make it right. I can get a private contractor in probably about a week to help maintain it, to help fix it. When Kennesaw State made the video with Monica Kaufman, who's now coming back to Georgia, the deal was they had to be used for educational purposes. If you make money off of it, that's fine. But the deal was you have to use it for educational purposes. Otherwise, somebody owes a bill to the producers of that movie, of that video for Aunt Fanny's Cabin. And as you all know, it's not cheap to make a video, not cheap to make a movie. So keep in mind, we have a responsibility, and if you want help with it, open it up to the community. They'll think of something. Don't keep it in council. There's a lot of people who care, a lot of people who don't mind donating, and a lot of people who will work there for you. And Public Works doing some work, keep in mind, we're shorthanded, and we're not going to get the best people there either. So send it out to the public. I'd like to thank you all for bringing this to our attention and letting us participate.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mayor Norton and council members. My name is Carolyn Sherman, and I live in Village of Belmont, in Ward 3. And I'm fairly new to Smyrna, but I dearly love this place. I really do. And I'm so happy to be here. And this project is new to me, but I am a preservationist at heart. In fact, my youngest daughter, worked for the National Trust for Historic Preservation for several years in Washington, D.C., and I got to visit their location quite a few times to meet with John. But and because of that, because of my interest in preservation, I decided to write to the National Trust for Historic Preservation and also to the African American Heritage Preservation Foundation, it's a mouthful, and to see if maybe one of those organizations would be interested in helping us rescue this building. They are known for doing that, and especially with the history around the building. It is much more to me than a restaurant. It is a symbol of what happened in the past that was not nice, but yet we really should preserve it because from that we learn. And I really believe that the future, the present was, of course, prepared by the past, and we learned from it. So I hope it will be restored somehow. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Pat Burns. I live at 10 Concord Road, Southwest. I live in a house over 150 years old. The floors, you pour something on the floor in one room by accident, and it rolls into another room. That's the life of an old building. But it appears there will be no Fannie Williams Center for Justice and Reconciliation at the sharecropper's cabin where Miss Williams was a victim of Jim Crow. Some Smyrna's leadership, it appears, hope to erase the cities and their embarrassing past by raising the cabin, a cabin whose rafters and walls witnessed the city's association with the Jim Crow era and bluntly put the characterization of Fannie Williams and others. This action will not tear down prejudices, as other leaders seem to believe. Instead, the bulldozers will bury our past deeper within musty museum drawers. The easy excuse is it's in terrible condition. That's right, the easy excuse is it's in terrible condition. Miss Fannie Williams gave her shoulders for generations to stand upon. Her leadership is an example of rising above one era and becoming a precursor to the civil rights era. Miss Williams deserves more than a feel-good plaque or paver. Fannie Williams not only survived, but also became an activist, community builder. We know her as a restaurant name. Had that not ever happened, we would not be talking so passionately about her. Instead, we do know Fannie Williams, her accomplishments, her perseverance, and her contributions. Therefore, no price tag should prevent honoring Miss Williams and transforming the old sharecropper's cabin to a Fannie Williams Center for Justice and Reconciliation, something only Smyrna would have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marilyn Blackburn. I live at 1034 Huntington Trace Drive, Smyrna. Today I sent a notice, an email to council members sharing that this is not about a small group of individuals making a decision on something that is historical in Smyrna. It's about the 56,000 plus individuals that live here who need to be part of this discussion, and they have not been. What we're seeing here with the Aunt Fanny's Cabin is it's a historical landmark. We talked about earlier that the Reed House was restored. We spent $1.9 approximately $1 million to restore that. That was a house. It was still a building that you're saying is historical. This is historical as well. What we fail to realize is that in the house and in these walls, what Miss Williams did was she exudes the strength, the courage, the perseverance, the faith, the compassion, the intelligence to make sure that our community was a community of one. This is not a time to stand by and allow this chapter of Smyrna's history, which is chapter 1890, to be swept under a rug. As painful as it may be, there is a balm, a healing balm, that can heal and restore this community as one. It can be utilized to educate. Yes, this shows what Smyrna was, but Smyrna is much bigger to show where we are now by accepting that what happened in 1890 and 1997. Mr. Welch, your concern for the financial side of the restoration, as I said earlier, we spent money to restore the Reed House, and it was just a house. Why can't we utilize funds to do the same here? Because it's a part of this history and of the community, one that we should not take lightly. Justice and reconciliation and education is what we should be looking at with Aunt Fanny's Cabin. And as I said earlier, this is not about 6 individuals making a decision for 56,000 people in this city. Allow us to make that decision. Allow us to take us further as it relates to the history of our city. And don't be ashamed of it. It happened.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sean Martin, and I reside at 2884 Anderson Circle. I just want to read to you the email that I sent earlier this afternoon, and it was the post that generated a lot of buzz. And it reads, Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The article below was recently shared on social media in hopes to offer a perspective on Aunt Fannie's cabin that would encourage all to honor her memory appropriately. It sparked lots of engagement with over, actually right now, 950 reactions. And I ask that you please table the vote until a time when a replacement/action is deemed acceptable and resources allocated before the removal of the cabin. At the very least, seek input from more than 6 voices. The Racial Trust Building Initiative is the perfect place to dive deeper into meaningful discussion about how this narrative and its harm can be rightly positioned in Smyrna's history books. We all deserve that. Start of the post. In light of the recent vote this coming Monday, 12/20/21, to demolish release Smyrna's Aunt Fannie's cabin, it is important to put a face with a name. Fannie Williams, aka Aunt Fannie, was a brilliant, resourceful woman who understood the Jim Crow system and worked it to serve the needs of the African American community. Her story is one of resilience, fortitude, grace, humility, and activism. Her life was hard, her commitment to a greater cause was evident, and she persevered through it all. Her recipes and cooking put Smyrna on the map as prominent people came from all over the U.S. to get a taste of authentic Southern cooking. And this fact alone is central to Smyrna's history. She understood that her brand was key to her own success and hence that of her community, allowing her the ability to secure donations to ultimately co-found Cobb County's first Black hospital. This is what I call a victim turned victor in the grand scheme of things. This would ultimately be the reason why she would be targeted by the KKK and other hate groups, and yet she persisted. With no offspring to give her proper burial, her body rests somewhere unknown. Her honor deserves more. While it is true the building embodies the spirit of the worst of humanity, it is a missed opportunity to not repurpose its presence to tell her story of resilience and fortitude, which is also a reflection of Smyrna as well. What once was a city that prided itself on 0% Black population is now one of the most diverse communities in Cobb County. My hope is that Smyrna do her memory justice and not reduce her contribution to a bronze plaque to be forgotten and trampled on. Cancel culture robs us of the redemptive blessings of the human experience. Fannie Williams was much too important for that. How many of us will be so fortunate in our lifetime to be primary donors to a building and have the privilege to participate in its groundbreaking? That would be a feat in current day, especially dealing with all of the threats she faced back then. The second image above is captioned as followed. Pictured above, groundbreaking, Aunt Fannie helped found the first Black hospital in the county. Sent by a dear friend, this photo brought me to tears. Sometimes moving Smyrna into the future means embracing a mindset that enriches the present, using the past as a spring point for greater understanding and deeper experiences to be had by all, especially for our children.
Ms. Martin, we're going to need to wrap it up. We're a minute over, please.
Okay. Again, please hold off on the vote to demo release the cabin from Smyrna's keep. Deliberate carefully on proper replacement, acknowledgement of her contributions, and seize the opportunity to enlighten and uplift community. Our children deserve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight who'd like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, I will turn it back over to Mr. Lindley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've had a good dialogue, and I do thank everybody for their comments. One of the egregious things, and I want to say again, there is universal agreement, I believe, at least the last time we talked about it, there was universal agreement to recognize Fannie Williams for her contributions and to memorialize that in this community. I, for one, believe she was done very wrong, and to a number of you that sort of spoke to her life. She persevered through a lot. And Dr. Wheaton, I encourage everybody to take a listen to the audio of our final meeting, because there were some poignant comments made by some of those on our task force. I would say one of the most egregious things for me is that we are told by the historians in our community that she was a valued member of the community, which I don't think any of us are going to argue that. I, again, will say I think this body wants to recognize her for those contributions, and frankly, to right a wrong. What I think is up for debate is the folks that positioned her in her role with that restaurant, which, as Mr. Pickens noted, and as our historian on the task force, Mike Terry, noted, she never had any ownership interest in it. As I think everybody hopefully knows, she passed in 1949. The restaurant was roughly, I think, about 15 or 20 years old at that point, had achieved some modicum of success at that point. And when she died as an alleged loved one in that family, she wasn't buried in Smyrna. She wasn't buried anywhere near Smyrna. Smyrna has a historic African-American cemetery right down the road. She's not buried there. She's buried in an unmarked grave south of Atlanta. So there is a great disconnect when I hear about her role with that family that put her in a position that they made money off of. There were 3 owners that were told before it finally went out of business in 1992. So part of, I think, wrestling with the realities of that building, it all comes back for me to a really bad story. And I think we need to break that trend. Recognize the woman that did great work in our community and our county for a lot of people. And again, I believe she was wronged. So history can judge us accordingly. But with that, Mr. Mayor, I move do pass with the recommendations from the task force.
I have a motion do pass. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Wagner.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment to the motion, please.
Okay, Mr. Welch should be recognized for an amendment to the motion.
I'd like to amend the motion to eliminate the end of it with the stipulation that if no acceptable proposals are received, at whatever date we supply, that the building will be demolished.
Mr. Welch's motion is to remove the language associated with the original motion that's after the 30080 on the agenda item in its entirety from that point to the end. Is there a second on that motion to amend? Okay, that motion dies for lack of a second. So now we have a motion. Ms. Wilkinson?
Yes, I did not know that. I thought this was part of the motion that we were talking about. He made an amendment to it.
Mr. Welch has offered an amendment to the motion that would remove the language in the agenda item after the zip code 30080 that reads, with the stipulation that if no acceptable proposals are received, the building will be demolished. That is his motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Ms. Welch has seconded that motion, so now we will vote on the motion to amend.
Mr. Mayor, can we have just discussion and commentary about that?
We can have as much discussion as anybody wants.
Thank you. So I'd say one thing of note is that my points, and I think other folks on the council tonight, is there's no hard desire. There's a desire to find a solution that appropriately honors Fannie Williams and potentially allows private folks to come and do something with the cabin, or who knows what, right? So those things are still open. So I think that should be understood by the community, that our desire is to reach a positive outcome with the problems that face us. It's not to necessarily demolish a building, but it's to reach a positive outcome. So I just say that before we vote on this motion.
Any other comments before we vote on the motion to amend?
I have a question. Is there a time limit that was with the sale of with opening up for proposals before the city demolishes it? What is that?
Mr. Lindley?
Mr. Welch can speak to his amendment. My understanding is that strikes everything. The underlying ordinance or action this evening and recommendations from the task force are that a period starting tomorrow through February 1st, RFBs be accepted for any party that wishes to move the building off-site, off city property. Should no RFPs come in or be deemed acceptable, then the building will be set for demolition.
And that period for the receiving proposals goes through what date?
February 1st, and there has been no date set or recommended prior to action. We left it at council's advice to sort of take that as we get them.
Okay, so now we are back to the motion to amend. Is there any other comments on this motion before we vote?
The real reason I made my motion to this extent is I would hope again that between now and February 1st that we see some proposals come in with a plan to keep the cabin. And my own personal preference would be to keep it on the site that it's on, adjacent to the museum. So that's the reason for this motion. I really don't want to see it go away. I think there's a lot of people in Smyrna that want to see the cabin stay. I've read a lot of those emails and a lot of those comments, and a lot of the people don't want to get rid of the cabin. So I would hope that between now and then we'll see something that'll come in that will change our course of action.
Any other comments before this vote is taken? Okay, the motion on the floor is to amend the original motion. It was seconded by Ms. Wilkinson. All those in favor, please vote. And that motion is to amend is defeated 4-2. Now back to the original motion by Mr. Lindley. Do we have a second for the original motion? It was already seconded by, I'm sorry, that's not showing up on by Mr. Wagner. Okay, thank you. So we have another motion on the table for passage of this item, which is the committee's recommendation. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson. All right, that item is approved 4-2 with Mr. Welch and Ms. Wilkinson voting in the negative. All right, we will move on now to commercial building permits. We have none. Item 8 is the consent agenda. Mr. Bennett, can you please read the consent agenda for council approval?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Item A, MIN 2021-92, approval of the December 2nd, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Item B, MIN 2021-90, approval of the December 6th, 2021 pre-council meeting minutes. Item C, MIN 2021-91, approval of the December 6th, 2021 mayor and council meeting minutes. Item D, 2021-604, approval of the reappointment of Ward 2 resident Darby Whalen to the Parks and Recreation Commission. This is a 2-year term that expires 12/31/2023. Item E, 2021-621, approval of the reappointment of Ward 5 resident J.D. Smith to the Planning and Zoning Board that expires 12/31/2023. Item F, approval of the reappointment of Leanne Rakoff to the Parks and Recreation Commission. This is a 2-year term that expires 12/31/2023. Item G, authorization to increase sewer rate per 1,000 gallons from $8.10 to $8.99, effective January 1st, 2022, to be billed on the February 2022 bills. To recognize that Cobb County Water approved an 11% increase to the wholesale sewer rate charged to the cities effective January 1st, 2022. Item H, authorization of a road closure at Roswell Street and Windy Hill for construction roadway modifications by Trayton Homes from December 21st, 2021 through December 23rd, 2021, with alternate dates of December 28th, 2021 through December 30th, 2021. Item I, approval for a road closure on Powder Springs Street for construction of one speed table by Lano Contractors beginning Monday, December 27th, 2021 through Friday, December 31st, 2021. And item J, approval of the renewal with Georgia Municipal Association for 2022 workers' compensation insurance coverage and administration.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I have a motion by Mr. Lindley to approve the consent agenda, seconded by Mr. Wagner. All those in favor, please vote. Ms. Wilkinson.
Yes.
And that's approved 6-0. Item 9 is ward or committee reports. Ms. Wilkinson, we'll start with you tonight.
Well, thank you. I will say that I'm not feeling very well, so thank you for allowing me to do it from, virtually tonight. It was important, but I'm not feeling well. I did get a COVID test today, so I will know if that's, what it is or if it's just some other, problem. But anyway, thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson, and thank you for not coming here and sharing the way you feel with all of us. Mr. Pickens.
Thanks, Mayor. No report this evening.
Mr. Wagner.
Just in light of all that, to remind everyone to get tested before and after you have some family gatherings this holidays, and just try to be smart and cautious as we go through.
Mr. Lindley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy holidays to everyone. Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
Just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see y'all next year.
Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and be safe. But also want to thank all folks for coming out tonight. These are challenging things we talk about, and we don't take it lightly up here, and there's a lot of different ways to look at these issues, so appreciate your input and appreciate you coming out. Thanks.
Joe?
No, sir.
You've said enough tonight?
Sir, I have
okay.
said enough.
All right. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Heather. Okay. Item 10 is show cause hearings. We have none. Item 11 is citizen input. We had 7 sign up, but 6 have already spoken. The last speaker that signed up is Montserrat Knowlton, 1367 Poplar Point.
Mayor, Council, good evening. My name is Montserrat Knowlton, 1367 Poplar Point. Let's talk about the history and racism in Smyrna. According to historian William Marchioni, African Americans were 13% of the population of Smyrna in 1872. In 1915, Fred Morris's family owned the Reed House. And while he served as Smyrna city attorney, he was party to the lynching of Jewish merchant Leo Frank in Marietta. By 1920, there were 17 black households in Smyrna. Most of Smyrna city officials, the mayor, city council, and the school board were among the Klansmen who marched regularly through the black section of Smyrna in order to intimidate the African American community. By 1927, Smyrna's town government adopted a segregation ordinance stating that no black person might occupy a dwelling closer than 200 yards from that of a white person. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education decision provided the start for integration. By 2017, the black population of Smyrna rose to 31%, and Smyrna finally succeeded in electing its first African-American city council member. So here we are in 2021, and city council is facing the vote to sell downtown land to Stillfire Brewery. Issues with racism and breweries are well known. In the last couple of weeks, we have heard about Fannie's cabin. The racism that went on in that restaurant prompted task force members to talk against the preservation of the building in downtown Smyrna. At Aunt Fannie's cabin, we found racism from the past, but here we are facing future racism with Stillfire Brewery. How will council members respond to this? Are we changing the racism of the past to a new, more sophisticated racism? Looking at the ratings on Stillfire, there is a comment from Denis Beganovich. Overall, this place is for good old boys. If you are of color, of different ethnic background, don't recommend coming here. This is only for specific demographics. These issues are virtually captured in the presentation about breweries that Andrea Worthy, Smyrna's Economic Development Director, showed to council, the DDA, and at the town hall meeting. In her presentation, you can see that all of the future breweries, there are more dogs than people of color. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knowlton. Nobody else signed up to speak. Yes, Ms. Martin?
Yes, I just wanted to say as a follow-up to what I said earlier, of course I'm disappointed in the vote. I do believe that more could be done, and when I was standing over there raising my hand, I just wanted to ask if you all would be so kind as to consider a motion that would have included some kind of, if there were any monetary fees or whatever to capture in the original demolition, relocation, replacement, whatever that is. Because what happens is, and I'm just going to give you guys from a perspective of an African American, we hear these stories all the time. Oh yeah, we'll get to it. Oh yeah, we just have to do this first step. We'll come right back to it. And then all of a sudden it dissipates into oblivion. And so the goal was, when I was raising my hand, was to encourage you all to incorporate some motion that would have allowed some kind of monetary bank, if you will, so that at least that effort is started with the demolition, with the release of the property, so that the intention to honor Miss Fannie Williams in her memory is set in stone and set on course. That was all I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say was I questioned the cost estimate because when I attended the CAL meeting and this item was discussed, there was a question about lead-based paint. And no one had the answer to that question. But $20, Home Depot, you could actually run a test, a lead test. And yet no one in the room could answer that fundamental question. I stand in front of you as a registered architect in the state of Georgia. I've been in the building. I know what it would take in order to get this building up and going. It is not, I've walked the building. I've taken pictures of the quote unquote no foundation. That building has sat there for a long time. There is actually a crawl space up under it. There's a lot of information that I was hoping to relay to you all before you came to this decision. But unfortunately, it's moving way faster than I can keep up with. So I just wanted to express that. I just hope that you take some action so that the true honoring of Miss Fannie Williams is actually set in place as this transition proceeds. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everybody has been clear, both from committee members to all members of council in their comments tonight, that is the intention of this council to properly memorialize and honor Fannie Williams. There's been no question about that. So I think to your point, it was set in motion, and we will follow through. I intend to appoint a group that will put this together and bring a recommendation about how to do that to this council. Councilman Wheaton will certainly be part of that. I hate that he wasn't able to be here tonight, but know that we are moving forward, and it's not going to be a plaque or something that will be trampled on, as has been talked about earlier. We'll do it properly and something that the community can be proud of. If there's no other business to be brought before this body, we are adjourned at 9:02. Thank you.